name's Erik. I'm the head baker and co-owner of Need Loves with my wife, Lauren. This is great to be here because this was my sleep-in day. So I marked it off the calendar and I got to sleep till 6 o'clock. So I'm pretty pumped about that. Lauren and I are not from Chattanooga. We came here from Philadelphia about 16 years ago, where we went to college. And like Chris said, I had the pleasure of and the gift of studying bread at the Baking Institute of San Francisco. And I was through that, I had gotten connections to travel Europe and stage at a few bakeries. And that's really when I tasted bread that I was just amazed with. I just didn't realize bread could taste this good. And that brought me to, I have to figure out how they are doing this. And so that's when I got into the process and the craft of bread making. Before I start, I just want to lay out a few expectations here. I'm not an expert at rituals. So sometimes I can barely tell like how to define the line between rituals, routine, and craft. So I'm just putting that out there. I'm also not a public speaker. I'm a baker. And so they keep me in the back for a reason. And so if I start going down a rabbit hole of the molecular structure of wheat, I told Chris just to chuck his coffee at me, and you all are just give me like a thumbs down or something, because it'll happen. I do have an outline, so I don't think I'll stay on track and not go into wheat too much. So you're probably like, why is this guy here? He doesn't know about rituals. He's not a public speaker. And so Chris asked me, and I said yes. Chris and I have known each other for years and have helped each other out through a variety of ways. So when Chris asked, I just say yes. He also promised I only had to answer one question. And that question is, what does bread making mean to me? Bread making means the work of many hands. Sometimes it takes 20 pairs of hands to make one loaf of bread. When you're talking about the farmer, the miller, the bakers, it can be that many hands that touch one loaf of bread. And so when I bake, I think of all the hands that have touched that bread or that process before it. In our bakery, a loaf of bread on the shelf probably took about 6 pairs of hands to make that. Bread making also means the baker's bench. And the baker's bench is central to a bakery. It's a wood table, probably about 3 feet by 15 feet. And it's made out of maple. And this is where all the bread that's going to be baked that day gets weighed out, scaled, and shaped. Unlike other places where you have, separate areas to work, the baker's bench is the center. And honestly, it's the bonds that you form around this bench that make it irreplaceable in any artisan bakery. Bread making is also gives me a sense of being something way bigger than myself. Getting to be a part of the process of this grain, wheat, that has been around for over 12,000 years and that has in some ways sustained us as humans. I think it's just amazing, and it makes me feel very insignificant. Bread making is also getting to do a profession that's both gives pleasure and nourishment to our community. One of my favorite things is getting to see a little kid rush up to the pastry case and plant their hands and face and start pointing out the pastries. It's just a gift to see. And it's bread making's inspiring. Recently we've developed a relationship with a farmer, Murray Brent, with Day Springs Farm in Georgia. And he's growing this French heirloom wheat in Georgia. And I won't go into details, but heirloom wheat is pre-World War II wheat. It's has a less yield. There's no reason for Murray to be doing this type of wheat as opposed to modern wheat. He would get paid more, but he's so committed to this quality of wheat. And when you're down there and driving back, you can't help but think, I have to respect this man, and it would be irresponsible for me not to make the best loaf I can possibly make. And of course, bread making is, it's baking bread at our table, it means to me, with our family. So, yeah, as you can see, bread making theoretically is very ritualistic for me. In my understanding of rituals, and they talked about this earlier, it focuses on how we do an action, not just an action to achieve a goal. A ritual's goal is to be intentional, not automatic. Rituals impact us on an emotional level, not just a physical. It increases our sense of belonging, emotionally energizes and inspires us. It can increase our feelings of trust, and it helps us to be in the present. Simply, bread making is a meaningful expression of an ancient craft for me. Sounds pretty nice, right? Well, don't worry, because I screwed up this meaning of bread making for myself and my team. And how did I screw it up, you asked? I simply made the mistake of pursuing it as a small business. Slowly, the rituals of bread making, the why and how we do this craft, over time turned into routines of bread making, the automatic process of the craft. I took the craft of bread making, the craft I fell in love with, and I thought, hey, what if I used this bread making as an engine to serve our community? And then naturally thought, oh, business would be a perfect vehicle to do this. So 10 years ago, Lauren and I took over a bakery that had been struggling a little and in many ways has lost its vision. The building and equipment had been neglected for years. But in the beginning, when we met as a team, most of our team's decisions reflected the rituals of bread making and what that meant to each of us. We agreed that if we were going to do this demanding craft, the early mornings, the hot in front of the oven, this is how we were going to do it. And I even remember we had a piece of paper that said Need Loves 2.0, and it had all these values of the rituals of bread making that we had, and I still have it. For years, I felt energized, inspired, and a sense of belonging. We were sourcing organic wheat. We were creative and disciplined in our craft. And starting in 2016, however, we started to experience really steep growth, both in sales, products, and employees. We went from 18 to 67 employees. And it honestly, at times, felt like I was running a completely different bakery and business. Slowly, my role changed from being head baker to head of put out every fire that could possibly happen in a 7,000 square feet building. It was just relentless. Slowly, our commitment to rituals shifted to a commitment to routines. Our decisions went from how are we going to do this to what is the most efficient way to do this, and just what gives us the most consistency. Routines became our primary compass, and rituals were no longer a part of the conversation. Routines conceptually are enticing for a baker, and I would argue they are needed at some times. They essentially help automate our actions to get consistent outcomes. As I said, routines are process-driven and focus on the what. Rituals are purpose-driven and focus on the why. Routines goal is to make our behaviors automatic, where rituals' goal is to be intentional. Routines help provide structure and direction. However, what they fail to give us is a reason why it matters. I had become untethered, tired, automated in my responses, distanced to those close to me, and I felt like everyone's needs was just a box I needed to check off as quickly as possible. I learned in a real way the emptiness you can feel when you only have routines in your life. I'm doing pretty good staying on task here. And then this thing called COVID came into the world. I remember walking into the bakery after the shutdown was announced. It was empty of bakers, customers, vendors, empty of products, and empty of routines. It was empty of routines. I remember thinking this was it. You know, had a forum, and some bakers in Europe I worked at, and in San Francisco, we were all talking, and there were all these bakeries that were closing, and many have been open for generations and were now gone. And Lauren and I were facing the reality of if this business can make it. 67 employees to 18 in a matter of days. Our wholesale revenue down 87% overnight. And at that time, there was no talk of PPP or economic help. And so this brings me to a story about my son, John Erik. The early months of COVID, the kids were at the bakery with us every day. And they would usually head home a little out with Lauren after lunch. I would usually get done around 3 p.m. But before I headed home, I would always text Lauren so the kids would have time to hide and, plan their surprise attack, which always led to some WWF WrestleMania, a lot of backbreakers, sleeper holds. It was definitely one of the highlights of my day. Several weeks into the shutdown, however, there was one particular afternoon the weight of everything just felt too heavy. 3/4 of our team were gone, continually filling the workload of 5 positions on one person. The responsibility of keeping our staff, customers, family, and friends safe. Every decision was a complete crapshoot. And no matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. So after cleaning the ovens, I texted Lauren, and the kids were notified. I remember taking an extra block, and before getting to the door, taking a deep breath. Now I was ready to be John Erik and Patton's wrestling dad. Doors open, kids go scrambling to their hiding places. Soon the attack happens, which happens in the same place it always happens, which is our bed, aka WrestleMania Arena. The wrestling begins. However, I just couldn't hide my emotional and physical exhaustion, and I stopped wrestling. My son, John Erik, who was 8 at the time, asked, "Why are you stopping? What's wrong?" I reply, "Sorry, buddy, I'm just tired." He rebuttals, "But if you're tired, you always still wrestle." My response, a little more unfiltered, "I'm more physically tired than ever, John Erik. I'm working the equivalent of 5 people's jobs and also just emotionally tired. I'm also scared we won't be able to pay our staff, vendors, and bank." John Erik questions, "What happens if we can't pay them?" "Well, we would have to consider selling the bakery." John Erik, "Like the bank, could take the bakery?" His little lip begins to quiver. "Dad," he said, "I'm just a kid. I can't handle this kind of stuff." And that's exactly what it was. I can't handle it, and I couldn't handle it. And at this moment is when I broke, and I felt completely broken. Shit, it's all good. get through this. In my brokenness, however, I began to rediscover the same rituals that inspired me to start this journey 6 years ago. And that's what our team did. We let our rituals determine our actions during the pandemic. As bakers, we just asked, what is our essential role in this community? And so we decided at that point to bake as much bread for as many people as possible. And I thought, if we're going down, then we're going down doing the craft we love for our community that we love. And that's when the cappuccinos, the lattes, the pistachio cruffins all ceased to exist, and we just baked bread. Without knowing what our rituals of bread making were, there would be no reason to stay open. Our rituals connected us to our craft and to the community we serve. In the end, it's not about the story of bread making, it's about how the bread makes us feel. Rituals don't have the power to transform a loaf of bread, but they do have the power to transform the ones eating and baking it. My encouragement this morning is maybe take inventory of the rituals you have or have had that meant something to you on an emotional level, and revisit them by writing them down, telling their stories, and sharing them with someone. My hope is that my kids and the generations to come can read and gain meaning from our shared rituals that mean so much to you. Thank you.